Are you thinking on taking your first weekend backpacking trip or researching for a long distance trail such as the AT? Well, in this video we'll go over 5 common issues backpackers run into that I noticed on the AT and other hikes. Stay tuned in this video series because I'm going to go over some things you'll want to know for your first few hundred miles. Hey guys, Escape here. Here at Escape in the Office, I bring you along on my adventures and we go over gear, tips, tricks, all to help make your next escape from your office more enjoyable. Alright, so let's dive into it. Normally, Leave No Trace is lower on lists like this. However, with COVID-19, more people than ever have been outdoors. I know this isn't all backpackers, because it might be some car campers, people going to local parks, but it is an issue. People are leaving traces all over, and awareness of Leave No Trace needs to be spread. Keep in mind, even if it doesn't seem like it's an issue in your local area, there are other wilderness areas that might consider reclosing because of how much is being left behind. Now more than ever, Leave No Trace needs to be at the forefront of every backpacker's mind. Now I'll go into Leave No Trace a little bit more in depth in another video, but for now, the things you'll need to know are all trash needs to be packed out with you. When you go to the bathroom, go at least 70 to 80 paces away from a campsite, trail, or water source. If it's alive and you need some firewood, don't cut it down, only collect what's dead. And another useful tip is if you're on switchbacks and you see a shortcut down the switchback, don't take it, let the vegetation regrow. So whether you are an absolute beginner or a backpacker with thousands of miles under your feet, now is the time to reach out to your friends, your family members, your coworkers, anybody who might be a beginner, and make sure that they know about Leave No Trace. If you want more information to tide you over until my video comes out, check the link down in the description to the Leave No Trace website. Okay, let's get on to the more typical issues, which are usually somebody bringing too much gear or too heavy gear. Some people bring along items they won't use. I've done it, we've all done it, every beginner has done it. Now, I took a Bluetooth speaker with me on the AT thinking I would use it every night. I never ended up using it at all. I ended up sending it home. And if you check up here at my most recent hike, I did it again. So the thing I ended up bringing along because I wanted to test it out was this solar charger, and I ended up dropping it in Silent Bob's car halfway through the video. I didn't need it. Now, other people bring gear that is simply too heavy. Old backpacks that are made of material that is just heavy. Tents that are not designed for backpacking. Wearing jeans, just gear that is not optimized for what we're trying to do. So you'll want lightweight options for all of your gear. Just keep in mind that some packs do actually have an upper weight limit, and you're gonna wanna keep an eye out for that when you're shopping for your pack. Now, some beginners bring too many clothes. I've seen on some hikes where somebody brings a pair of clothes for each and every day. It is simply not needed, guys. So, here's the system that works for me. 2 shirts to hike in, another t-shirt to sleep in, a long sleeve shirt for when it's cooler in the evening and in the morning, 1 pair of zip-off pants to give me the option for shorts, 2 pairs of socks, sock liners, underwear, my cold weather coat if it's necessary at the time, and always my rain jacket. That's all I bring along with me. Your system might vary, you might need to look for something that works for you, but definitely make sure that it's all light. Every piece of clothing that I have is synthetic and a lightweight material. A few other common items that are brought along that are usually dropped on a long distance hike or sent home are books, cards, games, extra tent stakes, extra first aid items, large knives or cutting tools, and way too many Ziploc bags. I saw that one on the AT. Somebody had a box of gallon Ziplocs, a box of quart Ziplocs. They didn't really need to carry all that. So for entertainment when you get to camp, consider digital options. Digital books and digital games on your phone. They weigh nothing, but if you want a good place to start for your gear, please do check down in the description. There is a spreadsheet I've left for you guys. Feel free to use it. Those are just the essentials that you should have, and then you can build the rest of the kit that works for you around that. On the flip side, some beginners bring too little gear. They'll forget to bring an essential cold weather gear item when it's chilly, or they won't bring rain gear at all. Keep in mind, rain gear is that one piece of gear that I recommend to never leave at home. Even if it's 60 degrees out, it is hypothermia weather, so if it gets a little bit breezy, you can put it on as a windbreaker. Always have your rain jacket. And as cliche as this sounds, for rain gear, it is better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Another common item is not enough food. Sometimes people overcalculate their food, but there are quite a few that actually don't bring enough. Keep in mind that you'll want at least 1 extra day's worth of food with you every time. It can come in handy carrying an extra day's worth of food. An example is this clip of my AT hike. I holed up at Muskrat Creek Shelter the night I got into North Carolina. It got too cold and I was wet and soaked, and I kind of just hunkered down for a day and just warmed up. Luckily, I had that extra bit of food, and had I not, I would have had to hike out. And the bummer about that was I would have missed this awesome trail magic I ran into when I left the shelter. So the last thing that I noticed people not carrying enough of was actually they didn't carry a shelter at all. When I was on the AT, I saw a few people shelter hopping. Guys, this is an awful idea. You want to carry a shelter with you. The weather can turn at any moment, and if you're in between shelters, you're gonna have nowhere to go but run to the next shelter. Always keep your shelter with you, so that way when the weather turns on you, you can hunker down and stay safe, dry, and warm. So one thing that is often overlooked is foot care by beginners. Keep in mind that the most common recommended footwear is trail runners, and I recommend them too. The reasoning for this is because they dry quickly if they get wet. So when shopping for your footwear, make sure it is at least half a size bigger than you normally buy. A good way to test this out is actually be on your feet all day and then go shopping. That way your feet are already a little bit enlarged. Keep in mind, when you get those shoes, you're gonna wanna break them in before you take them out to the trail. So a good practice I like to do when I'm hiking on the trail is actually wearing sock liners. And there's a reason for this. So think of it like this. When you're hiking, if you have just your foot in your sock will rub with your foot if it's a little bit loose, and what that'll do is cause the first couple layers of skin to form a blister. Now if you have your sock liner and you're hiking and your sock is a little bit loose, it's gonna rub on the liner instead, and it's actually gonna prevent blisters. I've never had an issue with blisters doing this system. Now the one thing you're gonna wanna keep in mind is that the liner is synthetic and the sock is merino wool. You want the system like that for a reason. The synthetic of the sock will wick the sweat and the wetness away from your foot, and we'll put it into the merino wool sock, which actually dries fast, which is helped by trail runners. Usually, if I step into a puddle, a couple hours later, I don't even notice that I did it. Now, if you want to check the liner and the sock out, I have them down in the description below. I highly recommend them. However, if you don't want to go out and buy sock liners and you already have your wool socks, you can use some sort of synthetic dress sock. The one thing I will recommend, however, is that you turn them inside out. And the reason being, the stitching can get under your toenail. If you go the already pre-made sock liner like these, the stitching is on the outside. You want to make sure that whatever sock is contacting your foot has the stitching on the outside, so that way the stitching doesn't get underneath your toenail, because eventually it can actually rip the toenail out, and that's very unpleasant. You don't want that to happen. Now the last thing I recommend as soon as you get to camp, but after you get your shelter set up, is to air your feet out. I personally like to wait until after I put my tent up because I drive the stakes into the ground with my feet, but as soon as I'm done with that, my feet are in these sandals here, and my feet are nice and dry a couple hours later. Keep in mind, that's my system. It might not work for you, but it is what I recommend. All right, the last thing is about not knowing your gear. Guys, you wanna make sure you set up your gear before you go out on trail. When I was out on the AT, I actually saw a few people that had a tent, and we were on the Springer Mountain end of things, and it looked like all they did was just pull it out of the shipping box and toss it in their pack. Looks like they had never even bothered to open it up. So here's a good way to help out with that. When you get your gear together, set it up in your backyard if you have one available. If not, go to a friend's. Once it's all set up, go to a car campground and set everything up and stay overnight. The next thing you can do, grab a friend and go on a short overnight backpacking trip. After you do that quick little overnighter, the last thing I would recommend you do at least once before you go on the main trip you want to go on is to go on a 2-night trip. You go in a couple miles and then you hike 5 to 8 miles and then you get back to your car. The reasoning that I am suggesting this is so that way you can start to get a feel of how your pack is going to feel on your back. That way, if there's any adjustments that need to be made, you can contact the vendor and maybe swap out for the right size, or they can give you some tips to kind of help out with that. The one thing I will recommend though is that when you take these first few trips, don't go alone. Go with a friend or try to go somewhere popular. That way, in cases of dire emergency, if you need help, someone's there. All right guys, how about a bonus tip, huh? All right, so while the AT and a lot of popular trails are generally safe, the one thing I did notice on quite a few hikes, some people didn't bring a way to get a hold of somebody. They didn't bring a personal locator beacon. This can be like a Find Me spot or a Garmin InReach, but they didn't have one. Guys, make sure you carry something, and even if you're not carrying something, make sure somebody knows where you are. Anything can happen. The weather can change, you can get injured, so when you get your map together for your hike, if it's a short weekend loop or something, make sure people know where you are and what days you're planning on staying where. That way, if something comes up, they can at least call the authorities and they have a place to start their search. Just be sure to pick the right device and method that works for you. Please guys, be safe out there. Well, there we have it guys. 5 things I learned in my first few hundred miles. If you found this video helpful, please do like, comment, subscribe, and then click that little notification bell so that way you can keep up for the next video of the series where we will go over speed and distance in the first few hundred miles. If you want something else to check out, please do check out my Minister Creek hike, escape the office, and get outside.